Today we're going to be talking about 5 genes in ball pythons that are kind of subtle and secretive. By themselves, they might seem unimpressive. In some cases, they can be almost impossible to see. Many of these small, subtle genes are actually giants in disguise. When comboed up, they make such an incredible difference, and they become a major difference maker in the things that you're trying to do and create. So today I figured I would show you 5 of these genes that I think make some of the biggest differences in ball pythons, even though by themselves, you can sometimes scarcely notice them. Starting off with the special gene. And special gene by itself, well, it just is kind of a little bit lighter. Sometimes some people will look at this and they wouldn't be able to really tell a difference. With a trained eye, you can. Sometimes they will have a little bit of granite. What we mean by that is some flecking in the pattern itself. But that's not something I see on a lot of examples that I look at. There's some normals that have some stuff like this. So some people might have a difficult time determining that this is indeed a special, which is an incomplete dominant in the blue-eyed leucistic family. Actually, often special can be comboed in such a way in this family that doesn't actually create the famous all-white snake with blue eyes. We actually just recently made a video about this. We actually shared a few of the ones that make a pretty unique looking animal called the crystal, the combination of the Mojave and the special. Obvious right there, once you get these two combos together, that you got something incredibly special. Starting off with special pieds. Special pieds are pretty unique. Almost all the time they're very white snakes, but often you get a snake that has a head pattern and then right on its nose just doesn't have a head pattern. This happens more often than you'd think, and in this one in particular, it's a bit of a paradoxing too. It's kind of doing that but then showing almost like a faded type pattern. But here is more of a traditional sense of what I'm talking about with a special pied. You get like a little toupee on their head, very high white animal. It's very rare that you get something that affects the head in such a way. Clowns are so darn popular because of what they do to the head of a ball python, and this is incredibly unique. If it didn't strip the pattern in such a way that it did, I think that this would be one of the coolest combos out there. You can kind of see like some of the uniqueness that these animals give off. Like you get ones that are half pattern on the head, one that has no pattern on the head but yet has pattern in the body. They got these beautiful eyes in most cases too. It's not something that you can normally get from very many genetics at all. We talked about the crystal morph. Well, people have found that it works incredibly well with monsoon, which is the most wild pattern that you can get. The pattern's already perfect, so affecting the color is where it's really all at right now, and crystal creates these beautiful colors in this light undertone and a nice golden head on top of it. Even in something that normally would be a little bit more of a darker morph, it doesn't try to compete. It brings a shade to it that's incredibly beautiful. This GHI red stripe special here proves it in the sort of tannish undertones that you're getting, which would normally be a much darker animal. And you kind of see a theme here, especially with how it works with clown and bringing in almost a different color palette. It's flirting with both light and dark here, but brightening and enhancing it in a way that's just absolutely gorgeous. Another one that, like Blackhead on the flip side for the dark morphs, works well with just about anything it's put with, especially when you're thinking about a blue-eyed Lucy genetic. Any of these in the Bell complex sometimes have a tendency of being a little too powerful in some cases, but not this case. Its subtleness actually serves to help it. I love the bamboo gene, for example, but it is difficult to work into things. Special knows how to work with other genes quite well, including even in the Bell complex. But by and far, the best special I think I have personally ever seen was when I laid my eyes on the special Pompeii from JSA Reptiles back at Tinley, going on 3 years now. It was something incredible. It took the Pompeii morph and basically gave it like an inverted type look. It brought colors to it that you didn't really think could be done from an animal like that. Like maybe it would just be too much, but it really just takes those colors from Pompeii and just inverts it and brings a completely different game to the table. You keep these awesome letterings. I mean, it literally says MIA right there on the back of the snake, but the animal is absolutely beautiful. You can kind of see what I'm talking about here. It just kind of inverts those types of colors and turns them on their heads and gives you something that's similar but a different flavor of it. I love the sandy undertones that you don't really get anywhere else. It's like a tropical beach. Incredible animal, and really goes to show you what special does and how drastic of a difference it makes. I mean, look at this snake right here when put side by side with the normal Pompeii. The difference is so unbelievably drastic, and not trying to be corny here, but it really does go to show you how special is. Next up, we're going to be talking about Yellowbelly, probably the original gene that was overlooked, including by yours truly. I bought an animal a while back, actually from JSA Reptiles, and I love that animal. I still have it with me to this day. It gave me my first Batman at the time, but I had the opportunity to get her sister that was the same genetics with Yellowbelly. Now, at the time, this was a decent price difference. I believe it was like about 500 bucks. I wanted to save money, and while this animal that I got did end up proving out to be het pied, and I don't know if the other one would have. The fact of the matter is that this one not having Yellowbelly made a major difference. I am kicking myself to this day that I didn't end up going that route. It's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have. However, I still very much like the animal I got. Yellowbelly is another incomplete dominant that does a lot. They are an old morph, first being produced I think around 1999 or something like that. The idea of it being a Yellowbelly, I have yet to see one with a yellow belly, though I heard that they actually do exist, and that's kind of where they got their name from. It can be difficult to determine the untrained eye. They have like a little bit of like a checkered edging. They often bring up this flaming on the sides, and they do change the coloring on it a little bit. In combos, though, they become a little bit easier to tell. For example, in the pied, which is one of the first ever combos with pied, it was called the pumpkin pied, and they were really incredible, and they're pretty easy to tell because they have a different coloration, and their saddles are very jagged and kind of like checkered. But again, this gene doesn't really just stand alone. It's an entire complex of genes, sometimes called the superstripe complex, but often what I know it as is the Yellowbelly complex. When combined with itself, it actually gets an ivory, which is an all-white snake with black eyes. Sometimes they can have a little bit of yellowing in there, and often when there's another genetic, like pastel, they really do sometimes pop in some color. But when you start combining this in certain combinations, it really starts to shine, especially in its own family of genes. So we're going to talk about one of the coolest genetics out there, the freeway morph. Freeways are named for the obvious road-like pattern that goes down the back. Freeways are the combination of Yellowbelly and asphalt, and Yellowbelly and asphalt look the exact same. So much so that unless you do a genetic test or eventually breed it out, you do not know. Some people have told me that they can. I don't know how, but the freeway is iconic. It is one of the coolest genetics out there. Something so unbelievably unique that it can capture a pattern so iconic as a freeway or a highway. And a highway, by the way, is similar, except that instead of asphalt, you get gravel. Adding something as simple as enchi into the freeway creates what we call the Mardi Gras, which brings in these yellows and oranges that just dance through the entire snake. This creates so much contrast between that very, very beautiful bright yellow along the back, it being highlighted by this darker, shadowy type pattern, and then surrounded by like a desert in a way. You go one step further and add banana into that, and banana Mardi Gras might be some of the most intense looking animals, especially as babies. They have a very light undertone with these sparks of just bright, beautiful oranges and yellows, all splashed upon a white background. And instead of it being on a normal freeway, it's on like a red freeway. It's a very vibrant orange, but I mean, it looks red. It is incredible. And in my opinion, the coolest base combo for the freeways and highways. It's a project that will never die down. It will always be popular with both breeders and pet lovers alike. And it's really obvious why. Don't overlook this gene like I did and miss out on the incredible beauty that it can bring you in just about every single morph that you can put it to. The next gene that I wanted to call out and bring attention to is the Russo gene. It's another gene that we work here as well. Same with the Yellowbelly actually, but looking at it just by itself is probably even harder arguably than the Yellowbelly to determine. Sometimes again, you just get these little flamings coming up the side. There can be a little bit of a different faded crown on the head. I've heard that the coloring can be just a little bit better. But this is such a sleeper gene that when it originally was discovered, they seriously thought, and with good reason, that this was a recessive. And I believe, if I'm right, it is the very first of the blue-eyed leucistic complex genes. But they didn't know what that was at the time. So at some point, somebody bred Russo to a Russo, and they got themselves the very first ever blue-eyed leucistic. And at the time, you think you've got a het. So much so that they literally called it the het leucistic. And then when you got the combination, they called it the white diamond. It was also known as the het white diamond. But it can't be. If I put this snake to another blue-eyed leucistic, I am mostly always going to get an all-white snake with blue eyes. So it is related to genetics like that in the lesser complex, which obviously are not recessive. One copy of lesser is very seeable. One copy of bamboo. Yep, you definitely got one. But this one, not so much. But what does it do in combinations though? Well, it enhances just about everything that you get. Take a look at this Bottnose Russo OD clown from BC Balls and Reptilia. Orange Dream definitely brings in a lot of different coloring. Bottnose definitely brings in a lot of different pattern type looks and even some coloring. But the Russo is really making this thing a lot more creamy, and it really enriches the colors on this. For example, take a look at it compared to this just OD Bottnose clown right here from Jersey Gay Balls. You can definitely see the creaminess in this animal, and if you look at the dorsal of the animal, you can for certain see what it's starting to do in creating this sort of magma type break along the back, and it spreads this along the black and just kind of creates this shadowy pattern that's just absolutely incredible. Moving on to this GHI Black Pastel Russo clown. GHI is one of the coolest things in clown, but in this combination here, you do get some of these types of shadowing. It really brings up the whites on the sides to that shadowing really just taking effect along the back of the animal. It's a very cool contrast because what you're looking at here is an animal that is mostly a shadowy type dark, but then when you see the sides of it, the contrast is very different. It's a pretty bright white along the sides. So when you see a shadowy white next to a shadowy black, you're getting a different kind of contrast there, and the pattern in the middle just serves as a beautiful transition piece essentially between the two of them. Another great combination here with this Acid Spot-Nose Yellowbelly Russo clown. Another one that just ends up being a lot creamier. Acid is a really cool gene that goes well with anything. I can't wait to get Acid or Confusion in my collection. It's kind of on my radar right now, but you really see it here. It almost looks like it's got a microdose of like hypo in there or something. Here I think you really see it. A Zebra Enchi Russo Pastel. It is really creamy and beautiful. Again, kind of flirts with how the special makes things look in a way. And here's one that's flirting with looks of the Pompeii, even in this Hurricane GHI Yellowbelly Black Pastel Red Stripe Russo clown. In fact, you're only missing the spot nose here to be another Pompeii, but you definitely again see a lot of creamier undertones in this. These genetics without the Russo would not look like this. Again, it's almost starting to look like that special Pompeii, just ever so slightly in that undertone type color. By and far the coolest combination with Russo that I've ever seen is this right here. This is a Cypress Yellowbelly Spot-Nose Russo Lace Clown, and it is one of the brightest snakes I've ever seen in my life. I don't know why this one doesn't also have a nickname like Pompeii. It is incredibly cool. And look at the X on its head too. It looks like a mischievous face on the head, something like that. It is bright, it is beautiful, it has nice contrast, nice shading. It is dang near perfect. The only thing this is missing is the white lace version of this, which is a super lace combination. But it really goes and shows you the awesome potential of what Russo can do, even though it is so unbelievably subtle. And it serves as a wonderful springway into our next gene, Lace. Lace is probably one that you've heard maybe of more often now. Also known as the Black Velvet, or again, once called the Het white lace because it was also thought to maybe be a recessive. It's known for bringing in a little bit more of a clean type pattern and really brightening animals up and enhancing them for sure. But seeing it by itself can also be a little difficult. Lace is a genetic that when comboed with other things can keep them nice and clean, similar to how Desert Ghost works, but I don't find it cleans it the same. It just keeps them enhanced the same color. So when you get an animal like this Cypress White Lace Firefly Clown, which by the way, white lace is two combinations of the lace gene. It does have a super form. It feels like it's a different version of Desert Ghost where it keeps these things nice, bright, clean. It doesn't brown out, so to speak, or anything like that. It keeps them nice and beautiful and creamy, but doesn't clean them up quite the same. Sometimes Desert Ghost can clean up some of this granulation and stuff that you see, and while that might be fine and dandy for adding some crazy, just stark contrast, there's something to be said about these granulations that are nice, that are cool, that should be enhanced, and they should stay. I think that lace works well with these sorts of things. Another white lace here, like this Yellowbelly White Lace Clown. You see here that there's two copies of the lace gene and Yellowbelly, and you start to see the insane contrast that this animal has. Lace looks kind of subtle, and Yellowbelly definitely looks unassuming, but comboed with Clown, it just pops at you in a way that nothing else really can, and it's so cool, so unique in what it can do. I really love it in this combo, honestly. This Cypress Spot-Nose Yellowbelly Lace Clown. Just one copy of lace here, but again, you see the major difference in this creaminess that it brings along into the the animal. When you get genetics like lace, like Russo, a lot of these enhancing type genetics, you can keep them aging very beautifully and very, very nice and vibrant. Of course, we gotta go back to this animal right here, but there are plenty more to show here with lace, and you can kind of see a major difference here when you put them side by side. You can kind of see a lot of the crazy potential when it comes to lace and how it's just brightening animals up. And again, it's what I mentioned earlier right here. The granulation in the sides stays, but the brightness comes along for the ride. It doesn't clean it up, which is good. The granulation in the side of this is chef's kiss. It's so beautiful. And then you kind of see what it can do here. Look at this. I don't know if I've seen one that looks quite like this. I would almost think that the colors were changed or something like that. It doesn't look real. I'm not sure I've seen one with quite that color palette, that undertone, that shade of, I guess, yellow, you'd call it. It looks like something nearly out of a fairy tale. A lot of these laces end up growing out and still just look so beautiful. It almost looks like a brighter version of a Pompeii, the pattern anyways. So you can imagine what these things would look like when they actually hit these combinations. Absolutely incredible. Lace is definitely not a gene that you should sleep on if you can get it into your collection. And last but not least would be the redhead ball python. This gene is pretty unassuming. It can be determined though. I mean, it gets its name from the subtle orangey head that it brings in. But again, just by itself, that's realistically its most major contribution. But the combinations are so beautiful and so nice. Again, I think I actually showed this very one earlier because it had specials, but now they're tag teaming together. You start to see these combinations of what they can do, and it just creates this beautiful orangey type undertone in this animal, this special enchi. I can tell you for a fact that enchis, as they grow, start to fade, whereas this one is beautiful. The special and the redhead are gonna combo together and keep this beautiful coloring, the nice clean sides, and the beautiful rusty type dorsal pattern on this animal. Another one here with just an incredible pattern would be this redhead fire spot nose clown. This one really starts to show you because spot nose doesn't quite do this. This is nuts. What I start to notice in redhead is that even in the simplest combination, just one copy of a redhead clown just makes insane things. And you can definitely see it here. This is just redhead and clown. Obviously, we all know what clowns look like. This is not a normal clown. It definitely looks rusty and dirty along the back of it. The sides are just kind of exploded, but yet has enough blushing coming up from the bottom. And then again, the head just has this nice, almost washed out look to it and this beautiful orangey tinge. There's just so much going on here. You start to see it here with Mandarin into play. Mandarin's another one I could have gone into slightly, but it brings in these nice oranges that really suit this animal, this rusty type look, especially near the neck of it. It's just incredible. And it's not just clown it goes well with, it goes very, very well with hypo. And it takes that rusty red look and gives it a totally different dimension and brightens it up. Obviously, comboed with clown, it's even more spectacular. And we'll go ahead and finish it off with this absolute beautiful Yellowbelly redhead spot nose clown that might be enchi as well. What's not to love? I mean, the head is beautiful. It almost looks like a little paw print on the head there and a little heart on the nose. So you'd think that with how barren kind of the head is, that the snake would just be a little bit more barren throughout, but then just goes wild and adds all this beautiful color and pattern. It's just insanely off the wall. You get all these beautiful oranges just surrounded with this deep black highlighting and these yellows that just pop. The granulation in the orange, something to say about that too up here, but then as you get deeper down the snake, the oranges widen out and shows you the beautiful coloring within them. There's so much contrast, so much color here. What's not to love about the redhead gene, honestly? So these are 5 of these top sleeper genes that people sometimes ignore or are very subtle just by themselves. Let us know in the comments some of them that you think maybe we should talk about in maybe a part 2 of this video someday in the future. If you want to learn more about genetics like what we talked about here, you can actually check out our video on some of these genetics right here and here.